Jerry, really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
For people who don't know who you are, and I'm sure a lot of people do, you just give us like a 30-second overview of just who you are and your experience in the industry.
Sure, sure. I'm a Southern boy, born and raised, I guess. Had the opportunity to work with some really progressive companies throughout my career as I advanced, and I've enjoyed it. Family guy, two kids, two teenage kids. Wife. Been married for 25 years. Couple of dogs. Enjoy the family time at home. Most importantly, during the non-working hours, if you will.
Well, basically today we're just going to go over five questions and just kind of pick your brains on warehouse automation into logistics and kind of see what your perspective is. So just to start us off, working with an overseas company, you've done it in your past, but what are the key challenges that you see that overseas organizations face when they set up operations in the US?
Sure. That's a great question. As you mentioned, I've had the ability to work for a few overseas companies that were established in the U.S. I think the most important element is understanding the cultures, understanding the two different cultures. Business in North America, the U.S. in particular, is not it's not done in the same form or fashion that it's done in other parts of the world. And I think having a clear understanding on both sides of the oceans, whether it's east or west, and how that translates effectively into the U.S. market is absolutely the number one key. I think the second element is the interpersonal workings of your colleagues. There's typically when somebody comes to the U.S. and they're setting up an operation, they typically have very successful years of building a business in a different country in a different setting. And I think it's important for the folks in the North American or U.S. operations and the folks in the foreign operations, if you will, to really understand each other's culture. Once you understand their culture, then you understand how they act and they respond, and some of the best ways to do that is obviously getting away from the office, getting into that social to really understand how people think and what motivates them and how they respond. Certain cultural things can be misinterpreted so easily, and the more you know about each other's culture, the easier and the faster that your operations can really set up and go. And then the third element that I think is extremely important is to make certain that when companies do come to the U.S., especially a lot of the clientele, they're very intrigued by the European markets, as an example, and the technology, and making certain that that technology is applicable for the U.S. environment to make sure that people are in turn being able to understand it and work on it and handle it and operate it. And a lot of times that I've seen that those three elements really be missed by the folks that are coming over.
Cool, thank you very much. How have you traditionally overcome all three? And I would guess a particular focus with the last one you mentioned in making sure that your product has the right fit to the US market, because I'm sure you've seen that a million times.
Yeah, absolutely. Recently saw it, pretty prevalent with one of my past companies where the technology was really great. It was very advanced, but it was beyond the capabilities of the customer's base that was handling it. So we had to, obviously that had created some issues with reliability in the eyes of the customer. So we, as an organization, had to really go to work to not change it or lose the technology, but to certainly educate the customer on it. we set up a specific quote unquote university, if you will, where we were really invested in bringing the customers, support staff, maintenance staff, operational staff into our building to train them and give them the tools and the techniques that they just didn't have here in the U.S. It's kind of funny in that those tools and techniques in Europe were just sort of second nature, but for it was such new technology for the U.S. market that it really was a pretty steep learning curve. Unfortunately, I had sort of inherited that issue when I joined that organization, and I had to it took a concerted effort to really bringing them around and understanding where part of the problem was, and it always stems from education and knowledge of the products.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would even say, coming back to what we do in recruiting for organizations, it's always education to potential candidates on who this company is, what their mission is, and that obviously follows right through to the actual clients and user customer as well. So it seems to be a common theme of education being the most important thing in this industry.
It is. It really is.
Yeah,
It's taking the time to understand it and really understand what you're getting into, and how does that fit with what your current capabilities are today, but also how does it fit with where you're going as an organization, whether you're an end user or you're an OEM or you're a support staff for that in some form or fashion. It's really having that detailed plan that is
yeah,
so critical to the success.
yeah. Cool. Okay. And you've been an operations project management executive for many, many years, we'll say. Um, a lot of what we're seeing in the current climate of the market is you've got these great products, and in many cases, you've had companies that have been able to actually educate their clientele on how to properly use technology and harness it in the US market. But what we're seeing on the back end of that is companies have sold billions of dollars worth of projects, and they're now producing and manufacturing all those products in Europe. We've seen the Ukraine war, we've seen, Suez Canal, for example, loads of supply chain disaster, so to speak. In your roles, how have you traditionally mitigated that risk when it comes to deliverability for projects?
Sure. I think one of the elements I was taught when I was really starting out in my career, and I really uh, educate my team on this simple concept, and it's plan the work and work the plan, right? And making certain when you are taking on a project that you understand where your supply chain is and where your pitfalls, and looking for those elements that potentially could disrupt your efforts. Nobody wants to go in and say, hey, I'm going to invest $10 million and I'm just going to stock up a warehouse. I mean, it doesn't make financial sense, right? But those key elements and those products that you've got one source for, or single sourced, or certainly if you're manufacturing and assembling in a different part of the world and trying to bring it across via boats or airplanes nowadays, is just become more and more chaotic and hectic. And the best relief that you have is to make certain that you have a very robust, detailed plan, not only for a specific project, but more importantly for the overall business. We saw this, on the backside of the COVID pandemic, and the scrambling for all the microchips. Everybody was happy when all of a sudden all of that went to places in the world that were much cheaper to produce and more rapidly, and we were all happy as long as that it was rolling. But then all of a sudden, it just overnight, it seemed like it stopped, and it created such a snowball effect for everyone, ultimately the end users, simply because you just didn't have the parts and the pieces. And I think it goes back to, you nobody planned necessarily for COVID. I mean, don't get me wrong, right? But
Sure.
you certainly at that point have to make some business decisions where you can plan accordingly and inform your customers and make certain that you know what's being delivered and you know that you have the elements, and also add as many sources as you possibly can. The days of having the old single sourced solution, in some cases makes a lot of sense, but when you take the risk of a supply chain disruption that we're seeing, you know, you named a couple of them, right? You had COVID, you had a war in Ukraine, you got a Suez Canal, a ship, jammed
Yeah.
up a canal, right? I mean, those kind of things aren't things that people are planning to have happen. So you want to be able to have the uh, the variety and the options for selecting other elements. And I
Sure.
think it's a problem that we're every manufacturer you know of every product is faced with that same challenge today. I think it's a neat opportunity for our industry in that those guys that are able to help support those customers. I think there's a lot of technology out there that can be applied to certainly help them.
Yeah.
But it goes back to having a plan and working the plan, guys. And you got to first have that detailed plan out, and you got to be a lot of people will stop at level one or level two, right? I mean, you got to go down as far as you possibly can. I used to kid a little bit with guys and tell them, let's plan all the way down to the last lock nut, that we have.
Yeah. Makes complete sense. And I think you allude to there, obviously building really strong relationships with your clients as well, because no one can foresee these issues coming, and it's all about, I'm guessing, how well a project team or delivery team can actually communicate those deadlines, changes to a client, and have that trusted
Absolutely.
relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you have to be transparent with your clients, and that's one of the things I take a lot of pride in throughout my career with my past customers and projects that I've executed is I'm not going to tell them something that I don't know to be, absolutely true, or, if I don't know it to be true, I'm going to make certain that they understand, hey, here's the inherent risk, here's the transparency of what's going on, um, because they need to know, they need to trust in you, and I always look at it from a standpoint of how do I want to be treated.
Yeah.
If I'm having work done around my house or something like that, I would want to know exactly what the truth is and when is it going to happen, and what's the likelihood that one happens versus the other. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, okay. A bit of an off the cuff one, but how do you think organizations can communicate with their clients better? Because I mean, I speak to the industry all the time, and you hear of situations arise like force majeures, etc. But how can people be better communicators?
I think it starts in today's world. It starts with picking up the phone and calling. I think a lot of times, people are let's send an email and copy 50 people on it, and the a lot of times the communication in that email string gets lost, right? In
Sure.
what you're trying to convey, the message that you're trying to convey to them. So I think a lot of times it's just pick up the phone and call the guy. Go sit down with them and have a face-to-face conversation with them to make certain that people are as crystal clear as you can absolutely make it. And at the same time, listen, right? A lot of times, I think contractors especially, we're forced with trying to keep a customer happy, trying to make a couple of dollars, trying to live within the terms of the contract, and we don't pay attention necessarily specifically, what does the customer tell me? What is his pain point? What's his needs? How do I help him achieve his goal and solve his problem?
Sure.
And a lot of times, you want to communicate, you want to be clear with them, but you also want to listen to what their concerns are, because a lot of times they can probably help you 90% of the time overcome whatever the particular issue may be. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I think we've already probably touched on a couple of these in terms of you making sure that you operationally have those levels of plans, making sure that you're being a clear communicator with your clients. But in this current climate of warehouse automation and logistics, what, in your opinion, are the actual key components to make sure an organization can thrive?
Um, it's having the right team, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it all starts with having a team of people that are committed to rowing in the same direction at every level, whether it's folks out in the shop, whether it's your C-suite, it doesn't matter. You need to have a team that's all joined at the sort of at the hip and believing in what they're doing.
Sure.
I think you got to have a the right reputation. I think nowadays a lot of clients are buying purely off of the reputation of the customer, not necessarily just a low bid. Although obviously finance always comes into play. But I think you have to have the right reputation in the industry with the clients, and delivering that certainty to them that whatever the value of money they're spending, they're going to get what they've purchased. They're going to get it when they want it or when they need it or what they've agreed to.
Cool.
And I think that's ultimately key. I think having a team of folks that are diverse in experience, I think always helps. It's having somebody that you always have the experienced and the senior guys, but you also need the up and comers, right? So that you can have a consistent approach and a consistent organization. I know one of the probably the best things that ever happened in my career when I started out as a young kid, I was fortunate to have some senior level guys that took me under their wing and really helped me advance my career quickly, because I was knowledgeable and learning from them of their past experiences and past mistakes and successes. And a lot of times we tend to get one sided, as an organization. We tend to be a little more senior. We all we want nothing but senior people, or we want nothing but the younger crew. And I think there needs to be a true blend there within the organization. And
Yeah. How do you achieve that? Is it through, I mean, this would be, would it be through recruiting plans? Would it be through your network? How do you get that depth and diversity of experience within an organization?
well, I think it starts with the senior folks, right? It starts with building
Sure.
your senior team, your senior leadership, and building it with people that understand that, and people that enjoy mentoring and enjoy teaching and enjoy showing. And once you do that, then obviously the secondary thing is through your network, you start to bring on your younger generation, whether it's through internships, working with colleges, trade schools, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
You start to bring that next generation on, and but it starts with having the your recruiters and your effort put forth. Hiring somebody that believes in being a mentor and believes in training is as important as hiring a guy that's got all the technical degrees in the world, right?
Sure.
If you have all these degrees, but you're not interested in teaching and interested in showing somebody the business,
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably not that's probably not who you want at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. So we've talked a lot about how to make an organization successful, how to build an organization for success. Talking more about the industry itself, it's been a crazy year. We've seen loads of new things come out of Promat, like agility robots, humanoid. We've seen Vanderlander's kind of innovations winning their respective awards.
Sure.
Symbotic's green box that has just been announced like 2 days ago. But what are your top three picks for innovation in the space this year?
I think it's um, the employeeless facility, right? That's
Yeah,
that's really, I think, key to where everybody wants to go. That's um, that's a position that is very hard to hire for, and it's very hard to keep and maintain in that. So I think the combined technologies of AGVs and cranes and you name it, smart technology of picking machines. I think all of those combined go into to the ultimate goal of having a completely dark warehouse, right?
yeah,
That's ultimately the goal is having a touchless, if you will, system. Um, beyond that, I think the other element that's real big is really looking at the total cost of the ownership. What's my serviceability? What's my reliability? How do I maintain this? You can have really sophisticated pieces of equipment,
yeah,
but if it takes a PhD to maintain it, nobody's really happy with it. The second that it breaks, right? And
sure,
inevitably things are going to break, right? I don't care, you know, who built it, right, or what you built it out of. Everything ultimately is going to break. So I think it's having the innovation of making things easier to repair, understanding that mean time of repair and how fast things can get back up and running. I think is extremely critical for most businesses, and it's also one of those things I think a lot of customers overlook
yeah,
in their buying. It kind of goes back to the capex versus opex discussion, right? Um, but I think those companies that are embracing that and are presenting that to their customers are certainly gaining a leg up
yeah,
on the competition these days.
yeah. I mean, I've seen it last year when I think companies like Locus and Grey Orange and a few other people introduced robotics as a service, and it completely changed the landscape of the industry from, your traditional capex to more operational cost, which really lowered the barrier in the industry. So I thought that was really interesting. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So in terms of kind of something, obviously you're the first person that we've had on the industry innovators, as we're calling it. So thank you for the time, first and foremost. Something that
Really
I'd
appreciate
like
it.
to thank you. Well, something that I'd like to start with yourself, Jerry, is similar to Diary of a CEO. I've nicked it from there, but a question for your kind of fellow supply chain executives for the next episode.
Sure, sure. I think the one question I'd be interested in learning more about from other executives is where do they see the next generation coming from for
Yeah,
this industry? I think that's real critical. I see in my position, I'm on the sort of that midway of my career right now, if you will. But I do see a generational gap occurring. So I think how is everybody else approaching that? What
yeah,
is the key and what are they seeing? Are we really looking out for the next 15, 20 years? Are we looking out for the next 15 or 20 months? Because it does take it does take time to build that. Especially in those positions that a lot of people overlook,
Cool.
which is your site guys, your installation team, your installation base. You know, those are positions that are pretty tough to fill, especially with really qualified, experienced guys. You know,
Yeah.
you got a lot of those guys that are moving off into retirement now, and you know, there's a big gap there. So
It's an interesting one. I'm sure you'll be able to pick a couple of people's brains with that one, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's really it goes back into, what is your, as an organization, what is your recruiting process? What's your game here? What's your objective?
yeah,
Are you recruiting to build an organization? Or are you recruiting to fill a position? Right. And I think a lot of times, what I've always tried to approach is, you want to always be recruiting. It's a nonstop, continuous effort. Whether you have a position or not, isn't necessarily relevant in my thinking, because you want to be able to have the ability, if you do find that diamond in the rough, and you do find that one particular person that you're looking for, to say, hey, you know what, we like this guy. He's the right candidate. Let's go ahead and open a rec, and we're gonna call him, X for today, knowing that at some point in time there will be a new position that will open.
yeah.
Um, that's always good to have. So
Yeah, I mean, that flexibility is important, especially in supply chain.
yeah, exactly. So